Right. So data science and education. So this is a new meetup group that we founded just about a month ago. It was actually as part of an initiative called Data Science for All, which is run by a group funded by Schmidt Futures in the US. And they were encouraging organizations and individuals to make some sort of commitment that would help with the communication of data science. And that was really about, if you like, data science education, which is more teaching data science and informing people about data science. But I work in the edtech space, and I was particularly interested in how data science is used in that space. So I wanted to found a group which did that. And the reason I thought that was worth doing is because there are lots and lots of meetups focused on education. And there's lots of meetups focused on data science, and particularly within that, the dominant kind of tool in that space, as you're probably aware, or you will have heard of, is machine learning. So there's lots and lots of machine learning meetups, lots of tutorials, courses, and everything else you can do. But the intersection of these two things is relatively small. So you can go to education conferences or education meetups, and you will hear a little bit about data science, and you can go to data science meetups and hear a little bit about education. But for the few of us who sit in that intersection, I thought it'd be nice to have a space where we can share the latest research in those in that intersection, and also look at the different applications, maybe successes, and also maybe failures within the space. Okay. So this is the key kind of mission statement. So it's a home for data scientists working in edtech. So this is somebody who's either a statistician or a machine learning person who's working within edtech companies to try and improve education through the use of data, through the appropriate use of data, I should say. Now, that's a primary audience. I do notice a lot of people who've arrived today are teachers, and that's not a problem at all. We welcome everybody. And hopefully this will actually create a really good space, or vibrant space, for discussion. So the team, oh, let me just get this out of the way. These lovely things here. So the team, I have to move this guy up here. So I'm Simon Woodhead, and I am the co-founder of EDI, which I co-founded with Craig Barton, who, if you're a maths teacher, you may have heard of, and a guy called Ben Caulfield, and Ben's the CEO. I lead up on the data side, and we do, well, hopefully most of our research is led through pedagogy. So normally the kind of research that we do is kind of instigated by or in correspondence with Craig, so it tends to be quite close to the classroom. So hopefully that's a good thing, but obviously there's always potential conflicts. But I'm very, very interested in that work. Diggory, who's here today as well, is also from EDI. He's a data scientist who's just joined the data science team here. Anya Piku is not able to make it today, but she works at the Learning Agency Lab, and that's another, I think that's also associated with Schmidt Futures, and it is again this focus on communicating about data science. Yanis works at a company, or co-founded a company called Adurio, and that's based in Latvia. So Adurio is a really interesting business. It's actually focused on surveying stakeholders in education. That can be parents, teachers, or students, and trying to work out, what's important to them, and that can help inform school policy. So it's a different type of data, maybe to what a lot of us think about when we think about data in schools. Okay, so we're now going to pass over to Kavita. So Kavita has got a fantastic history in computing. So she studied computing, well, she can tell you how long ago, at university. She went on to work for some really big names like Channel 4 and the BBC. She, I think, product manager for the Olympics in 2012 and the Paralympics. And then she's been COO at BBC Microbit, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. I've known Kavita for a couple of years now, and I know that she's very, very knowledgeable about this space. So I was very excited that she's happy to speak to us all this evening. So I'm going to stop sharing at this point to let Kavita talk, and just give us a moment to hand over.
Yeah, we'll just swap slides if that's okay. So give us a moment. Let me go full screen. And Simon, oh, you've gone straight to the end. That's always the way, isn't it?
Yeah, mine did the same. That's great.
Exactly. Real automation would know. It would just know, wouldn't it? Cool. So can you see the screen now? Is that okay?
Yep.
Great, brilliant stuff. Thank you very much, Simon. I'm really excited by this meetup. I saw it posted on LinkedIn, like most of you, and then a few weeks ago I was like, Simon, when's it happening? And to my slight horror, he said, oh, would you speak at it? And I was like, wait, no, this is a space where I want to learn from you. This is what I was expecting. I want to learn from teachers and data scientists and acquire more knowledge. So apologies right at the top. This is a talk that will give you more questions than answers. So if you were looking for answers, that's not what I'm going to give you today. Just to check with Simon, are we going to split into groups afterwards to discuss this, or would you like me to stop as I go through? What do you think?
I thought groups afterwards would work quite well.
Great. So I'll signpost some of the questions, but hopefully you can all also bring your own questions to those groups, which will be great. As Simon said, I have this background of like creating really large scale websites and working through the internet from its sort of found infancy to where it is today. And then a few years ago, I was doing some digital advertising work out in India. Ankush was out in India with me, and I kind of didn't like it very much. I found myself creating, I don't know, Facebook apps to get people eating more kiwis and kiwis, the fruit in Dubai. And I was like, what am I doing with my life? There's got to be more to it. I have to do more, have more impact in my work. And so I came back to the UK and started thinking about how I got to make a difference in society, and decided that what I wanted to do was get more kids into coding so that they would have that skill set as well. So I went on to, as Simon said, join BBC Microbit, and I'm now currently Chief of Learning at Open UK, where if you don't know, especially for the teachers in this call, we are giving away currently Mew Mew gloves along with microbits so that you can program up musical gloves. So if you want to know more about that, there's a URL at the bottom there. But what did I learn getting kids into coding? Well, the first thing I learned is that there is a shortage of teachers, people who have tech skills. I mean, this may have seemed very obvious to everyone else. It was not obvious to me transitioning into the sector. There is a shortage of people who want to be teachers, and there's even a greater shortage of people who teach with the technical skills around coding and development in STEM subjects. And as you all know, there's a huge funding gap as well. You combine that with the pandemic, and I think that this is the thing that we should all be thinking about alongside the environment. We should be thinking about how we ensure the kids of the future have access to great education. The other thing I noticed, and over the 5-year period of taking kids from age 12 up to 18, was that as we gave these young people technical skills, more and more of them were talking about this thing called artificial intelligence, something I hadn't thought about in 20 years, like since university, as it happens. Did I just age myself, Simon? I just did. So let's say it's 25, I'll age myself even more. And what I found was there was a gender bias to those young people who were going into artificial intelligence, sort of doing a machine learning undergrad, et cetera, et cetera. And I was kind of like, wait, what's going on? Why is this group of people wanting to study this? So I went and studied it myself. I did the MIT bootcamp that taught me TensorFlow. I joined the British Computing Society AI Accelerator, and I went to Rachel's meetup, which was around women leading in AI, and I got as much knowledge as I could in a very short period of time and went, oh my God, this is going to be the future. And now I've done this a few times in the last decade, whether it be with cloud computing or with other types of technology. Nothing has excited me as much as hitting the internet and now machine learning. So I'm super excited about the technology. And if that doesn't excite you, then often when I'm talking to investors and corporates, I show them this slide from ARC, which is an investment body. As you can see, in the time from when I graduated in 1997 to now, the internet has gone from having not being a zero-sum industry to being $13 trillion. But if you look at the market value, I need to move your faces to remind myself of the numbers, but it's huge. It's going from 2 trillion to 30 trillion for a deep learning market. So if you're trying to convince your CEOs, this is the slide that you should be showing them. And why do I look at education? I think all of you know why you look at education, but sometimes I find myself having to justify it to either investors or to people outside of the sector who think, you know, people who are interested in impact often talk about the environment, and other people will often talk to me about making money. But the reason I look at education is this. This was shared with me about 6 months ago and kind of blew my mind in a way of looking at privilege. Excuse me. The closer you are to the center of this power circle is the place where you would be to have a sort of more power. I think that rings true. So white cisgendered males, for example, or heterosexual English-speaking people, you can see that that's the sort of center of the power structure. But when I was looking at this, I was going, I don't want to change the color of my skin. I'm quite happy with it. And I'm certainly not going to change my sexuality. I'm really proud of it. But when I looked at this, there were things that you could change. And one of the things you could change is your formal education. And one of the things that really fascinates me about being in the UK is that you can actually get a post-secondary education at any point once you've come out of school. It isn't something that's normally reserved in other countries to straight after university. So the idea is that that's the one section of the power dynamic you can change, makes this incredibly important. I know that you all know this, but I always think it's worth sharing. So I'm not really looking at whether robots can replace the teacher. What I'm really looking at is what I think a couple of you mentioned at the top of the call, is can AI give everyone access to education? Is that feasible? And in a whole different talk, now I'm thinking about it, I would talk to you about locations, geographic locations, or language barriers, or attainment barriers. But in this talk, I'm going to talk to us about the sort of sector work that I have seen. So if you look at the landscape of businesses out there, what are they trying to solve? I normally talk about human resources, which I'll talk about today, monitoring systems and flag up where they might work. I'm not going to talk about assessments because I think that's Simon's, I feel like Simon knows way more about assessments than I could do justice to. So I'm hoping there'll be a talk later on that. And I will talk about my passion point, which is adaptive learning platforms. But I will call out HR first. I don't think when we think about ed tech, we think about the impact on HR and how we're going to recruit more teachers, transition more teachers, get more teachers skilled up. Obviously, the impact on HR is across all sectors, not just education. It also occurs in, in the city or in finance or in other sectors. But those tools are being brought into this sector. And I think it's something that we should be thinking about from a sector perspective. Why do I say that? Only a few months ago, a company approached me to be on their board, and they were providing a video interviewing service where they were claiming to use AI to check whether your interviewing style was scoreable, and therefore whether you're a good fit for the role or not. So the idea of taking out biases is how they were talking about it. We obviously see this in CV screening, tech that reads your CV and matches it to the job. And we see it in all sorts of sectors. I'm not going to deep dive into that. What I might do for the purposes of our discussion is talk about biases. We all know that there's a bias in the UK of education being a predominantly female-led industry, with more people within leadership roles who are male. But I do wonder as well, with the sort of legacy of Section 28, where people weren't able to talk about LGBT issues in schools, whether we should be looking at biases from a different point of view. So I found this study from the LSE, which I found really fascinating. There's this idea that in our heads here in the UK, we think about the idea of gay stereotype jobs. You probably only have to think of an airline steward to think about what biases you already have in your head. So I have some. And the idea that the technology is beginning to talk about whether you can identify homosexuality within those texts, so going back to that video product that was shared with me. I have to say that this is a debunked study. This was a debunked algorithm from Stanford University. So anything that's out there at the moment that claims to detect homosexuality has been debunked. But that doesn't mean that people aren't trying it and are considering it. And so what does that mean for gender biases as people are recruiting? What does that mean for other types of diversity? I think it's worth talking about when we talk about the impact of AI, machine learning, or even data science on HR. The next area that I have been thinking about is monitoring. So a few years ago, I was lucky enough to be asked to go and speak to the Ministry of Education in Brazil, as you do. That sounded grander than it should be, but anyway, literally it was a very fast tour of Brazil. And one of the things I got to do was to look around schools with I won't name the technology company, because what they were doing was creating monitoring systems for their students in schools. They had an RDF a band where they were just checking, and this freaked me out. I have to say, I was just standing there in this meeting going, you're doing what and why? Like, why would you want to send information about where a child is in a school to their parents at any point on an app? What's going on? And they were talking to me, and when I pushed back, they were like, well, what if the kid is sick? What if they spend too long in the bathroom and go missing? We need to be able to send that information back and keep them safe. But I know from my own experience of school and my helicopter parents, I don't think I'd want that information to go back to them. And again, I'd love to hear your views at the end of this about where we should be monitoring. There's two examples up here. They're a little bit, they're pre-pandemic examples, so I haven't seen much during the pandemic, but they're both examples of monitoring. One was looking at brainwave detection. So this was a 200 school study out in China that was looking at how brainwaves change on their kids. They had a little band on their head. I still don't understand if this is propaganda or reality, but again, I'm very interested in knowing where that technology is going and what people are thinking about. And the other is facial recognition in schools. So we'll talk about this in a second. But there is definitely a trend across all sorts of different techs to monitor children in schools, whether they be just for their own safety as they're coming in and out of the building, or whether it be, say, eyeball recognition to check whether they're actually reading a page or doing what they're supposed to be doing. So all of that exists. I'm not going to deep dive into it here, but I'd love to know which bits that we should be talking about. Hopefully come back to a meetup where we sort of piece them together and set them against each other. But you link that to legislation. So actually, there's quite a lot going on in the legislation space already just this year. And it's actually quite hard for me to keep up. Just for this talk, I had to do a lot more research than I was expecting. On live facial recognition, the ICO put out a paper earlier this year. Where should we go? The European Union in March also put out a consultation paper on how we should be using AI systems. And what I find fascinating about the European Union's approach to this is that they call out education as a specialist area of concern. So where we should be identifying AI. And what they say is that if you're using AI to basically examine people and that then allows them access to an education course or a qualification, then this is deemed as a high-risk AI system and needs to be called out to the users. What that means yet, whether this will be like pop-ups that we just ignore going like cookies, or whether this means that these systems won't be able to come to market, or whether these systems will have to be regulated into the EU market, is not clear. And if you're interested in that, you can actually be part of the consultation process, because the process is open for 2 years. And as I said, hot off the press, I was reading about it only today. I only got the details last week. The UK government is doing exactly the same, but they've decided to look at GDPR legislation. So they've decided that what we'll do is we'll review the GDPR legislation. And as part of that, we're going to identify, the government's going to identify high-risk AI systems, or not, as the case may be. For the data scientists amongst us, they're going to also review where we're going to have our data stored. So can we have data about children here in the UK, or can we store it outside of the EU or North America? So all of that legislation is being reviewed at the moment. And again, that consultation, I think it opened on last week and is due to, I think you have to have your submissions in by the 19th of November. So you need to get there quite quickly. But it too has a whole AI section in there. So lots of things are moving. Again, I'm hoping that this meetup will allow us to keep on top of some of that legislation. As a complete aside, one of the things I do is run a humanitarian aid organization. And I think that humanitarian aid sector has lots of great tools that they're creating within this space. So Net Hope, for example, it's a North American organization, has an AI ethics toolkit that they've been using to both train the sector, but as we've seen with places like Taliban, with Afghanistan and with the Rohingya in Bangladesh, where there has been some really strong, difficult data breaches. I think there's something about using some of the learnings from humanitarian aid organizations as we think about education. So that's where I've got to thinking about that. So, last section. The thing that I'm most passionate about is adaptive learning platforms. I have to often explain what I mean when I say this. And what I was thinking about, so the reason that I think about adaptive learning platforms is when I was at Microbit, we actually did a research project with BBC R&D about how, if you've ever used the BBC Microbit, you'll know that within 3 minutes, you'll put your name on the device. But after about 5 minutes, you'll go, now what? I don't know what I do next. And it was always really hard to use the terminology, scaffold people into layered content, to actually deliver the sort of next piece of teaching material in the context that they might be interested in it. And it was really difficult to know where a kid was starting from or even where an adult was starting from, in order to direct them into the right tool sets, whether you should go for one programming language or another one. And then I heard Eric Schmidt talking to the BBC on a program, and he was talking about this idea that, do you remember, I know there's, Nicola was talking about being a maths teacher earlier. I was thinking back to my A-level maths, where I had to do like 30 problems for every concept I was learning. And Eric Schmidt was talking about this idea of, what if we could just work out what's the top 4 that would teach that concept to one person, and what's the other 4 that you could teach to somebody else. And for me, differential equations is like this, right? For me, differential equations is just an algorithm. I just work my way through it. But I was teaching it, I was looking at how we were teaching it to like 7-year-olds the other day. And I was like, oh yeah, there's a visual element to this. There's there's our graphs, and I understand graphs, but I just don't think about it that way, because that's not how I learned the concept. So using that in mind, I've been looking at what other organizations have been doing. And I think Duolingo, I always come back to them. They had something called DuoCon a couple of weeks ago. And if you haven't checked out their data science / AI talk, I highly recommend it. But in that, they talk about a piece of software they've devised, which is called Bird Brain. It's the idea that you only learn, or you learn best, in your zone of proximal development. It's the idea that you are most motivated to learn if it's just outside your comfort level. So if it's too easy, you're not going to learn. If it's too hard, you're not going to learn. But if it's on that edge of what you already know, this is where you'll be most motivated to learn. So what did they do? Well, what they do is they currently, so they claim in that talk, is that they can predict by what percentage you will complete your next language exercise with them. And I found that fascinating. So they didn't elaborate on what we do next, but obviously you can extrapolate, right? If you can figure out that this is where you're going to learn at an 80% rate, you can just keep delivering great learning content after great learning content for the user to be able to develop and stay in that proximal development zone. Although I hope on Saturdays they'll give me something easier to do, but they never do. And I always have no points with Duo. So the last concept that I will share with you today, because I'm sure I've gone over my time, was this idea of learning pathways. So I've been thinking about this from a completely different point of view. I was thinking about medical science, where you were trying to get a diagnosis. And in order to get a diagnosis, at the end on the right-hand side, your doctor would give you 3 tests, and then bring you in and chat to you at the first milestone. And then they will give you 6 more tests the next time round. And then they will do a diagnosis. They'll do 1 more test to reconfirm what they already knew. And then they would give you the diagnosis. But what if you could look at how doctors are doing this across, getting to the same conclusion from different testing regimes, because it is quite different depending on what blood tests you can do. You can actually figure out the quickest way, the one test that it will take you from getting from milestone 1 to a diagnosis. So using the same concepts, I've been thinking about how we can produce, we can look at how you give lots of different content, follow how people learn, and then get to the conclusion, basically get someone to the right point of learning very quickly. I hope that makes sense. That's sort of, if you get nothing else from this slide, taking concepts from medical science is kind of, and data science is kind of the thing I think is the closest in line to the stuff we're doing in education at the moment, having looked around at what else is there. Here's another slide. There you go. Let's go there. So to conclude, back to those robots are going to replace our teachers. Most people think AI is coming, but not for them. And it was really fun to hear the opening of some of yours to say that, yes, some tasks will be automated. That is basically my conclusion as well. Some teaching tasks will be replaced by AI, whether it be the administration of your school, or whether, as some of you were talking about, it's helping you create great lesson content, or whether it's about allowing people to self-learn in their own environments. It's definitely going to happen. What I want to reinforce is I think it's really exciting. There's so many of you here thinking about it from a data science point of view. You are doing good in the world. It's a really important thing to be thinking about now as the legislation is moving forward within this sector. And if you want to talk to me about it, you can contact me in all of these different ways, and I will hand over to Simon.
Okay, thank you very much. So that was very, very interesting. Particularly that last bit on adaptive learning resonated with me, because we have actually stolen our algorithm for adaptive learning from medical space. So yeah, it was quite interesting that. What I would like us to do now is, I thought it'd be nice to break into some smaller groups. So I was going to create 3 breakout rooms and allow us to talk about some of the things that Kavita brought up in her talk. Now, when I was planning this earlier, I pulled out just a couple of things. Well, the first thing I thought it'd be nice to discuss is what kind of monitoring of students is acceptable. So it's a very, very, very difficult question. So that may take up a little while, and we may get some very different opinions from teachers and data scientists. I'm quite interested to see the spread of opinions across there. If you like, what value do you need to obtain out of a piece of data for that data to be acceptable to collect? I guess that's the solution we would like within 10 minutes, please. That's the challenge. And then we'll, if we have time, we can then address another question, which are, what do we consider to be the effective techniques in adaptive learning platforms? So what's really working there in those adaptive learning platforms? So if you've got personal experience, maybe through things like Duolingo, or you work for companies that use these things. So anything you've got to share in that space as well. So I will open the rooms now. So I imagine lots of us are familiar with Zoom now because of some silver linings to the pandemic. And you will be invited to join a room. Please do join the room, and maybe there should be one of the organizers in each room. Let's have a look here. So Kath, who I know you're not an organizer, but I've promoted you today. And you're in a room with Kavita. If you guys can encourage everyone else to introduce themselves. And then Diggory, you're in another room and I'm in another. So, oh, it says someone's on a bus. So, okay, fair enough. It does make it tricky to do Zoom meetings on a bus. Feel free to listen into the meeting and message in as well, if that is of interest. Okay, I'm going to open the rooms now, and I will send some messages when it's time to consider the next question. Okay, I'll do that now. Okay, can everyone see the, let me just see if I can move you in. So Jamila, you're stuck in traffic, so I guess you are currently trying to drive. So I will not force you to look away from the road in order to join a meeting. I'm just seeing if I can. Unfortunately, I can't force you to join that meeting through the interface here. So I might have to desert you for a moment while we participate in the breakouts.
Simon, you're
I
muted.
think you're muted.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Yep, had to happen at some point during the call. Brilliant. So I have. Oh, look at that. I kicked everybody out of their rooms, but they have it's all kicking off in the other rooms, I reckon. So so they haven't rejoined.
You gave them a minute's notice.
I've given them a minute's notice. They're all going to get kicked back in here in a minute, whether they want to or not. They've got 16 seconds. Oh dear. Oh, we've got a few coming now. Okay. Hello, everyone. Is that everyone back in? I think that's everyone back in again. So I hope that was useful for everyone. I just wondered whether we could get some summaries from each of the groups. Hopefully they were about the right sort of size for some good discussion. So Nicola, I'm going to put you on the spot because you're in our group. So can you please just give a very short summary of our discussion?
So I kind of started off the discussion. My mind, when it was talking about monitoring, it just jumped to behavior. As a teacher, just jumped to behavior. Are they misbehaving? Are they, and kind of how I felt uncomfortable with the idea of that our classroom would be a bit of a panopticon of, where the children will have to kind of self-manage their own behavior because they're so afraid that, this algorithm is going to see if they're misbehaving. And then Ankush was actually like, stop a little bit. What should we actually monitor? I wasn't even thinking, there's so many more things that it can monitor other than just, are they being naughty? And kind of, even, kind of in that sense, what should we monitor? And I think Simon, you were talking about like in China about how, probes on their head to see if they're concentrating, and are we going to kind of look on and see, are they concentrating, or are we looking at their kind of eye contact to see such things as well. And we were talking about, okay, so what are we collecting? I hope I'm summarizing this well. So we were kind of talking about that, and are we just going to collect all this data that we're monitoring? And when we kind of get this data and we kind of look at it, should we just accept the conclusions that come about from it? And I was kind of thinking in my head, okay, well, what if some of these, how do we know if these conclusions are actually fair? How do we know that they're actually free from biases as well? And then after that, if I remember properly, we started talking about actually kind of the effective learning techniques, right? We started talking about effective learning techniques and kind of the opportunities there. And I think what Bennett said, sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name right, I thought, about the idea of like Viva exams and that kind of the opportunity there to actually stretch students further. And I thought that was quite good, especially in maths. Like we have some students who are, who are really able, and I'll give them a couple of questions, but it's like, I can stretch you even further. And I feel like the idea of those exams that can stretch students and improve their learning is really, really good. And I think also because it's so personalized to these students, there's an opportunity to help them specifically and to help students who are not neurotypical, or students who have special educational needs. For example, in a classroom, I can't just stop for one student who doesn't understand something. I can't stop the whole lesson for them. I'll have to stop for the average. If the average is not understanding a topic or has a specific misconception, I would have to stop for them. But with this, they have a personalized learning pathway. If there's something I haven't said that we talked about, please tell me. And you can add on to it as well.
That's good. That's good. No, thank you very much, Nicola. And yeah, sorry for putting you on the spot, but that was great. Okay, so can we have someone from one of the other rooms? Kath, can you nominate someone from your room, or have you?
Well, I think there's only Kavita and I left, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. In that case, I will ask you to update. Then.
I will do my best. So in terms of what kind of monitoring of students is acceptable, Rachel made the very good point that we need to think about it from the point of view of risks and harms first. So, you know, what's the impact on the individuals going to be of collecting that data and making sure that we're not invading their privacy. And we talked about, Kavita was sharing about what's acceptable in other countries, and that perhaps compared to other countries, we would be more culturally resistant to this idea of monitoring, that it's quite accepted in so many other countries. I think, you know, in particular, you were mentioning India, Kavita, weren't you, in terms of the culture of monitoring being much more just the norm. So we were talking about that. We were saying that, you know, for it to be acceptable in this country, that it needs to have a focus on the child. The monitoring we're doing needs to have benefits for the child. We need to be able to sell it that way. I think it has to be child-centric. And then in terms of the adaptive learning platforms, we talked about that a little bit less. Let's see, what did I put? We talked about the I think it's been a really long day and my brain's about to crash. Forgive me for slowing down at this time. We talked about a couple of particular platforms. Rachel talked about brilliant.org as being one of the maths ones that she'd seen that was most adaptive. And what she said she liked about it is the way it very much responded to what she was able to do and gave her more information to support the concept based on whether she got it or not. And that, I think that for all teachers, you know, any platform that is adaptive in that way. I talked about what Edie does in terms of building up the layering of the video support that we give to students depending on what they've understood and what they haven't. And any kind of technology that adapts like that in a very real way for the students so that they feel gradually more supported rather than less so, but they're able to fly whenever they're ready, I think has got to be a very positive thing. Kavita, did I miss anything out there?
No, that was a great summary.
Okay, great.
Cool, thanks, Kath. Okay, so we've got one more group. Who was going to speak for the last group? I'm gonna have to pick on someone. Okay. Diggory, who did you guys nominate anyone?
We didn't nominate anyone. It was a much similar discussion from the other two that we've heard. One of the pieces that we spoke about that hasn't come up yet was that when we're monitoring students, it needs to be transparent to them what information we're actually collecting from them, and also it needs to not infringe on their everyday life. And the act of monitoring doesn't kind of change the way that they're behaving. I don't, Timo, do you think was there anything else that has kind of been missed off there? Oh, you're on mute, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I wasn't prepared to summarize, but I think yeah, what you said is right. I would add that when we spoke about so Alok and Rabil made some really good points, and I'm trying to adequately represent them, but Alok, for example, made some I think really incisive comments around you know, for example, use of monitoring techniques in China as sort of examples of things that get towards the sort of nefarious end of things that were informative, because obviously we need to have the students' interest in mind, but also bear in mind that not all the users of the technology will have those in mind. And I think it was Rabil who made some really good points about, in terms of the effective techniques in adaptive learning, around the importance of having sort of local expertise. In other words, at least my interpretation of that was, you know, it's not good enough for a tech bro in California to create an algorithm that's then being used. For example, in Bangladesh, where Rabil is, you need people who've got, you know, who understand the local environment and the local culture and so forth. And that for other reasons, it's important to have local expertise, not just to be able to tap into global expertise that may be remote, sort of geographically and culturally.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point about the localization of any of these algorithms. You've got to consider that part of them. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. I've got a couple of final slides to share. Here we go. Let's see. Okay, hide this guy. Okay, so yeah, just a few requests at the end here. So obviously speak to anybody else who you think might be interested in learning about this space and encourage them to come along. If you are interested in speaking or would like to volunteer someone else to speak, please do get in touch with me. My email address is down here at the bottom, simon.woodhead@ed.co.uk. Let me know if there's any companies you want to hear from. Duolingo has been mentioned many, many times, mostly by me. I'm not on commission or anything, but they are a very good organization using machine learning very well. Maybe we can get a representative from there to come and speak to us. And then if there's any other researchers or research groups that are particularly of interest to you, then again, just let me know. Now, next time, so this time, well, the last Monday of October, we have a talk by Timo, who's just been speaking then. So he is founder of School Dash, and he's going to be talking to us about using unconventional data sets to understand what's going on in education. So I imagine everyone is familiar with the fact that the normal data sets that we kind of expect to have at the end of every academic year, that's performance in our standardized tests, so GCSEs and A-levels, are not actually available for the last couple of years now, so because of the pandemic. So what can we do about that? What other data can we use to find out what's been going on in education? So that's going to be a very, very interesting talk. So please put that one in the diary. Have a look at meetup.com. So data science and education, you'll find the event there. We can try and remember this ridiculous link. Hopefully I'll see a few of you there next time. Thank you very much for coming today. And thank you again to Kavita. Thank you so much for your very, very interesting talk. And thank you for encouraging this meetup to happen in the first place. So really appreciate that. And I hope everyone has a great week. I'll leave it there.